I would like to now invite Sir James Thompson to come forward to light the chalice and lead us in our affirmation of covenant, which is printed in your order of service.
I light this chalice with these words. Open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Open our minds to learn what is true. Open our hearts to love one another. Please join me in the affirmation of covenant, which you will find printed in your order of service. Saying, love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus we covenant with each other.
Comforting to hear a song everybody knows. Have you seen the musical play, The Music Man? I remember most vividly the movie version with Shirley Jones as Marion the librarian and Robert Preston as the music man, a huckster who comes to a small town called River City to hoodwink the residents out of a bunch of money by selling them. Well, to start with, he wasn't going to sell them anything. But they're a stubborn bunch, and he soon finds that he has to come up with something that they can see and touch. So he starts promoting the idea of forming a boys' band. He orders some band instruments and persuades the parents of all the boys in town to buy instruments. When the instruments arrive, he gathers the boys who have never played a musical instrument in their lives, never had their first lesson, and he teaches them his own personal method for learning to play, which he calls the think system. If you think the minuet in G, you will play the minuet in G. And at last, there is a band concert. And all the boys are on the bandstand in their bright, neat uniforms, and, looking all nerves, he whispers to the boys, "Now, think." And they play, la 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 la, and tears fill their mother's eyes. Look, that's my Timmy up there playing the tuba. The music is awful, but it's wonderful because it's there. Something they'd never dreamed, never imagined for their little town before the stranger came. A boys' band came true. And no one had been more nervous or frightened or doubtful about it than the music man himself. I begin with that story because though I will be talking this morning about how my mother, in what would have been her 100th year, and the 30th now since her death, is still present in my life, even though she has died. And that is how I prefer to talk about it, because that is how I experience it. Still, I know that I am not talking about my mother, but about the song of Marie that I have written and sung to myself, that I continue to sing and continue to rewrite and arrange in new settings as my life flows on in endless song above lamentations, tumult, and strife. My song of Marie sounds an echo in my soul. It is a real, though far off, hymn that hails each new creation, each development, each advance, each step in growth and maturation that I will take, as all of us do, each day, each year, from the moment of birth to the moment of death. And indeed, if I think the Song of Marie, I will play the Song of Marie. Look, that's Marie's boy up there singing that song. And maybe the song isn't quite right. And believe me, I've sung some awful songs in my day. But it is wonderful because it is there. And things I never dreamed for myself without her presence in my life, before and after her death, have come true because she was there to inspire the song. Just as I am not talking about Marie, but about the Song of Marie, I'm not speaking of myself as my mother's son, but a son of life's longing for itself. As with all of us, I came through my mother, but not from her, and though I was hers, I did not belong to her. She and I could strive to be like each other, and we did. But one of us could not make the other become anything. She gave me shelter, but I was destined to live in a time she could not visit, not even in her dreams. No, not in her dreams, but in mine she visits. No, not her, but my song of her. She cannot visit me today, but she does and has and will. For the Song of Marie is one song in a cycle of songs that are the song of life, the endless song in which we live and move and have our being, the song that calls the Spirit of life unto us, stirring our compassion and moving us to form our common life in the shape of justice. The Song of Marie belongs to the roots that hold me close, keeping me steady so that I can spread my wings and be free. I began writing and singing the song upon her death. I had no need of it before then. To be sure, I had collected scraps of melody and harmony and rhythm all my life until then, but her death spurred me to assemble them into a composition. She died very suddenly and too soon in a car crash. She was traveling. She'd spent a week in Ames, Iowa at the Presbyterian Women's Churchwide Gathering. She'd had the time of her life there, I've no doubt. And she was on her way home to St. Louis. She pulled out from a gas station onto the highway. She hadn't even left Ames, and she was broadsided. The oncoming car drove right into the driver's side door. A group of women from that conference stopped and gathered at the scene. They prayed and comforted one another, and they called the police and an ambulance. They sent us cards and kind notes. We learned at a distance that my mother was apparently unconscious from the moment of impact, that she didn't live very long afterwards. If she had to die this way, that was a grace. I got the news from my father by telephone. I was lying on the sofa watching TV sometime around 7 or 7:30 in the evening. The phone rang. I turned off the TV and answered it. Dad came right to the point of his call. Your mother was in an auto accident. She didn't survive. I think my first word was no. I think I probably repeated that word a few times. I don't really remember. I was instantly in shock and stayed that way for days. Friends came to visit to be sure I was eating. I would forget to eat. I wouldn't even feel hunger. I was that numb most of the time. But every so often, at least once an hour at first, it got down to a few times a day by the end of the week, I was overcome with tears. They just washed over and through me. They were unstoppable. They were irresistible. They were a force unto themselves. They were a grace, as most tears are. The summer my mother died was the summer before I entered seminary. Still recovering from the shock and intense sorrow of losing her, I entered the most intense experience of academic study I'd ever known. I had 4 classes that first semester. Each included some small group discussion. I'd had a lot of experience in small group discussion at church, in committees, in classes. I had a certain way of being and participating in small groups, and I was aware of it. I'd cultivated it. My role, my comfortable role in small groups was most often that of synthesizing the discussion, reconciling contradictions or differing points of view, observing connections between different things that were said, summarizing or suggesting the drift or direction we might be taking. I was very good at it. I was calm. I was a pretty good listener. I was sensitive to others' feelings and gentle in handling and interpreting them. Most of the time, I found something to say that was helpful to the process of the discussion. This was a role I liked, was good at, and had cultivated. But at seminary, it was all out the window. In my shock and grief, I was simply incapable of it. One of my classes was a seminar where everything to do with class participation depended upon small group discussion. That's all there was. And of course, that was where I noticed it the most. As it happened, there was a fellow in that seminar who was just as adept at filling my accustomed group role as I had ever been. That was a grace. It allowed me to let go of that role and be where I was and pay attention to what was going on inside of me. I found that the only thing I was capable of contributing to the group discussion was how I felt about this or that thing an author had said in our assigned reading or about some question or issue that was raised in the group. I couldn't necessarily go anywhere with it, but I had easy access to my feelings and a fair amount of clarity about them. I had to monitor my feelings to know whether they were about the discussion or something else. And I had to be really in the discussion, in the moment, to have anything helpful to contribute. It was a new way for me to be in a group, a new role, the only role I was capable of at the time. Grief had opened a door to my feelings, propped it open and kept it open. And I began to learn how to use them in new ways. That first semester in seminary, I had 2 Bible classes, predictably, Introduction to Old Testament and Introduction to New Testament. My mother was a Bible student and Bible teacher in her churches all her life. These classes pulled me into Bible studies with an intensity to match my grief. Through them, I felt in touch with her and found comfort in my grieving. I never wrote in a Bible before that semester. But Mom used to write all over her Bibles. Yes, Bibles, plural. And starting that semester, I wrote in my Bible. It was not just any Bible. It was the Bible I felt I had to bring with me to school. The one I received in Sunday school from the Presbyterian church we attended when I was a boy. All those years, and I hadn't written in that Bible. It was about time. During the week after I had gotten the news from Dad, an old familiar hymn tune kept running through my head. It was so old and familiar I couldn't name it or remember the words. My mother's minister helped me to find it in the Presbyterian hymnal when I went back to St. Louis for the memorial service. The tune is an early American melody called Foundation. The words that tune was first matched to are an 18th century poem that paraphrases Bible verses, putting them into the first person as though they were a quotation from the mouth of God. And as I read the third and fourth verses of this hymn, I felt as if my mother's God were reaching out to me to comfort me in my grief. When through the deep waters I call thee to go, the rivers of woe shall not thee overflow. For I will be with thee, thy troubles to bless, and sanctify to thee thy deepest distress. When through fiery trials thy pathway shall lie, my grace all sufficient shall be thy supply. The flame shall not hurt thee, I only design thy dross to consume, and thy gold to refine. What stood out for me in those lines were the parts that didn't quote the Bible, but were tropes, words added by the poet to fill out the meter and finish the rhyme. Those are the parts that say God blesses our troubles and sanctifies to us our deepest distress. That God only designs to consume the dross in us and refine our gold. In short, that we grow from and are strengthened by the trials of our lives. In my deepest distress, the deepest distress I had yet known, the shock and grief of losing my mother's God spoke to me. And in my grief, with the door of my feelings propped open as it was, I was open to the message. And my mother's God gave me a message that my God might have given. For me, God was well described by that Unitarian theologian I've mentioned to you a time or two, Henry Nelson Wyman. He called God the creative, integrating power in the universe, most fully expressed in the process we call life. That power in the universe that creates order and complexity and integration in matter as well as in spirit, in heart as well as in mind. Such a God would have said, as my mother's God did then, that our troubles may be blessed by how we meet them, and our distress may be sanctified by how we bear it and grow from it. From the dross of unintegrated parts may be refined the gold of an integrated and mature wholeness. And that goes for society as much as for the self. This was the note sounding when I began writing the Song of Marie. It determined the key. And as I transposed into that key all the scraps of tune and harmony I had collected from her during her lifetime, the values and life lessons she taught me, the habits she formed or tried to break in me, the temperament I inherited from her. As I looked deeply into these things and considered them anew, juxtaposed and connected and assembled and tinkered with them, and as I watched and listened to and studied the way her ghost appeared in my dreams, she was there, helping to bless and sanctify and refine me. She was there. She is here. She will be wherever I go. The shock I felt upon her death was a turning point in my life. The dam broke, and my feelings rushed into my consciousness with a power and immediacy I don't remember experiencing before then. My mother had said to me as I was growing up, "Feelings are to be overcome, not dwelt upon." You ever hear anything like that? As a boy, I heard that message as feelings are to be pushed aside or down or away. I heard it that way because as a boy, I had a hard time naming or even knowing what I was feeling. It just wasn't one of my gifts. When I was very young, I used to throw tantrums. I'd get so frustrated about dealing with my feelings. I had inherited that temper from Mom. Oh, did she have a temper? And looking back, I think that's why she emphasized that feelings are to be overcome. As I remember, Mom was fairly able to name her feelings. Her challenge, particularly with anger, was to overcome, to stay in control, and channel that energy into useful activity. She did that pretty well. When I was a boy, I couldn't see her struggle, except that when she was angry, she would yell, and it would take a while for her to calm down. I was very scared of her anger. It sort of erupted. It surprised me. It seemed out of control to me. But she was controlling it. She was only yelling. Again, I didn't perceive her struggle, so I didn't perceive her control. I first had to understand my own struggle with feelings to be able to understand what she was trying to teach me. My struggle was, and sometimes especially when I'm under stress still is, to name and know what it is I'm feeling right now. I made more progress and gained more skill at doing that when I was in seminary than in all my life before, because seminary demands it of you, particularly the component called clinical pastoral education, an intensive practicum in chaplaincy, usually in a hospital. Whatever your weakest links are inside, seminary makes you work on them. And it was this aspect of my seminary experience that led me to become so interested in mysticism. Remember that seminar where I was learning a new way to participate in group discussion? It was called Mysticism and Human Presence. We read not only Christian mystics, but Jewish and Buddhist and Muslim and Native American and many others. The common threads in mysticism in all this wide spectrum of traditions were first, an affirmation of a transcendent or sacred dimension in human experience, whether extraordinary or ordinary experience, whether fleeting or enduring. And second, a response to that transcendent or sacred part of our experience, the response of choosing to live in ways that keep us awake, alert, aware, and attentive, living deliberately so as to remind ourselves of and stay in touch with that sacred part of life through specific spiritual practices, ritual activities such as prayer or meditation or something else, or through rules and guidelines we follow in our ordinary daily living. Going to seminary so soon after my mother's death, that experience shone a bright light for me on the sacred dimension of feelings, that they are a grace, unearned, undeserved, beyond our ability to create. They are a given, a condition of life, of the world, like sleep and dreams and tears and love, the smell of rain, the taste of raspberries and cream, the way we look, the facts of our birth. And here they are, beautiful and terrible. Don't be afraid. There is a creative, integrating power in the universe expressed in you. Nothing can ever separate you from it. By that power, by your participation in it, there will come order and complexity and integration in matter as well as in spirit, in heart as well as in mind. In matter, we call this order and complexity and integration healing. And when speaking of the Spirit, we call it growth or maturity. Like any other gift, the grace of your feelings can be yours only if you'll reach out and take it as a gift. Some have that gift. For others, it's hard work. But you don't push feelings aside or down or away. You take them, mold them, use them. They are to be overcome as the potter overcomes the clay, as the carver overcomes the block, as the gardener overcomes the hard soil. When I was at seminary at our daily chapel services, I was fond of a little song we often sang from the Congregationalist hymnal we used there. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. I know that for many, the image of God coming down from a cloud to melt and mold and use you just doesn't work very well. But if we update our picture of God, think of God rather as the Spirit of life, that creative, integrating power in the universe by which we are made and in which we participate, then calling upon it to come unto us, calling for the grace of creativity and integration to work in and through us, to fall fresh upon us, is a way of reminding ourselves to prop open the door of possibility and to be open to power beyond ourselves, not of our making. It is to remind ourselves that we can reach the goal that shines afar because we are not alone, and powers greater than ourselves, graces we do not earn or deserve or bring about, but can only be given, are there for us to reach out and take, melt, mold, and use, for life to melt, mold, and use through us when we open ourselves to be filled. Some say that the universe tends toward dissolution and chaos, but that is only one side of things. There is a creative, integrating tendency in it as well, and we participate in that. The power of love and the promise of our faith is that we may choose that participation, even as by the life we are given, it chooses us. The Song of Marie says that feelings are a grace through which we participate in that larger, creative, integrative way. In their sacred dimension, our feelings are gifts beyond our power to make, and we may respond to them by embrace or rule or ritual so as to stay alert and faithful to their sacred aspect. They hail a new creation, a deeper, more complex, more integrated, more mature you. Healed and whole. May we each have the courage and serenity to reach out, take, and use them. There's another verse to this morning's opening hymn that doesn't appear in our hymnal that I'd like to share in closing. I lift my eyes, the cloud grows thin. I see the blue above it, and day by day this pathway clears, since first I learned to love it. The peace of God restores my soul, a fountain ever springing. All things are mine, since I am loved. How can I keep from singing. So may it be. Amen.
I invite our chalice lighter, James Thompson, back up to extinguish our chalice. Please join in saying our closing words, which are in your order of service. Go out into the world in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, return to no person evil for evil, strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings.
And may you reach out and grow from all life's gifts.